I've been waiting for Ghost of Tsushima for a long time now. It was one of the key factors for me personally to get a PlayStation 4. As a lover of all things Japanese, I felt like this game would temporarily sate that consistent need for that culture in my life. An open world game where you could play as a samurai or a ninja, to a certain degree, that fell in line with what I had always hoped the Assassin's Creed franchise would tackle one day. However, what I found was so much more. Ghost of Tsushima is a game that strikes emotional chords within me that few others have done before it in any art form. It is, by my humble standards, one of the best games of this generation. Konnichiwa, Legionnaires! Today it is my utmost pleasure to bring you my review on Ghost of Tsushima. I've been waiting for this game for so long, and I'm so excited to bring you my thoughts. And I'm not really ever the first person to put out reviews, as many of you know, but I really wanted to take my time to dissect and get into this thing that took so many years to create. Now, with all of my reviews, we're going to go over a brief plot synopsis, talk about the highlights and the shortcomings. If you want to go into this game blind, I totally understand, but so go, play the game first and then come back after if you don't want to spoil yourself on anything at all. But I just appreciate you stopping by in the first place, and hopefully you'll drop back by. But without further ado, let's get to the review. Ikuzo! Enter Lord Jin Sakai, a samurai who fights alongside his uncle, Lord Shimura, to repel the oncoming force of Mongol invaders. Overwhelmed by the foreign attackers, the forces of Tsushima are brought low as the Mongols plan to use the island as a staging ground to attack the mainland. However, by the grace of a young woman named Yuna, who pulls Jin from the battlefield after being wounded, our protagonist slowly recovers and finds tactics, as well as allies, to aid him against Khotan Khan. It is now up to Jin to decide whether he will stick with tradition and his old teachings, or learn more diverse strategies to eliminate this threat to his homeland. Let's start as we always do with the highlights, and buckle up because this is going to be a long segment. It's difficult to begin. The formula and weapons at your disposal are pretty standard in these period piece open worlds, or as I will now be referring to them as, papows. You have main story missions, side missions, and various side activities such as destroying enemy encampments to occupy the majority of your time. However, while on paper this game might look like just another papow, it is in the overall presentation that it truly stands out. The game in all of its areas does something that most games that fall into this genre do not. It lets you breathe. Not since Breath of the Wild have I played an open world game like this that lets you bask in its setting, quite like this one. Red Dead Redemption 2 could possibly evoke some similar vibes with its wonderful lighting and atmosphere, but I didn't feel at ease as often compared to when I was playing Ghost of Tsushima. While I love the ability to zip around the map with fast travel at almost every point of interest found in the game, I found myself, more often than not, running through the gorgeous environments. There's a great amount of detail in them, but the striking colors and the way the wind is almost constantly causing nature to sway to and fro makes the world feel so alive. Reminds me of a similar feeling I had when playing Witcher 3. Speaking of Geralt's latest outing, you do sometimes engage in small detective missions. Most games have implemented this sort of system, but I found its inclusion here a natural fit, even if I would usually get lost trying to follow footsteps throughout the world. Jin doesn't have Witcher vision, so I'll give it to him. Ghost doesn't overburden you with 1,000 things on the map either, and each optional excursion is actually rewarding in more ways than just an experience boost. Even the menu screens have this stylized, minimalistic approach that makes all the information easy to understand too. Just look at these menus, they're excellent! Using your handy-dandy little map to find scalable shrines dotted throughout this island provide a Tomb Raider-esque mini-adventure, where you're gifted with an equipable charm that you can modify your stats with. Following lovable little foxes to hidden Inari shrines that, once you found enough, allow you to get more charm slots. As if foxes weren't enough, yellow birds lead you to hidden treasures or areas you might otherwise miss. Bamboo strikes test your patience and memory, but provide a unique challenge that will raise your resolve, or essentially your mana in the game. I legitimately get excited and full on take a deep breath, close my eyes, and try to correctly put in the button prompts. Ugh. Completing these in one go makes you feel like a true sword master. On the other hand, performing haikus and relaxing in hot springs double down on this zen-like nature that permeates through the game. Different headbands and health boosts are your respective rewards for those. But I hope it comes across that while this game does boast excellent fighting mechanics, it is in these seemingly innocuous moments that give it a unique duality. This isn't even mentioning that you can find these areas where a little sign shows someone bowing, and if you bow, something magical will happen. I'm not kidding, when I saw this the first time, I was overjoyed, but I won't spoil that here. Tiny pieces of magic like this goad you into exploring every little hidden cove and waterfall for a fun little secret. As I was saying though, these optional objectives feed back into the main focus of getting stronger to defeat the Mongols in a natural way. You won't be grinding out camps and side quests for hours in order to progress in the story. Once you obtain the 4 fighting stances of Stone, Water, Wind, and Moon in the game by either studying Mongol captains or killing them, you could opt out of doing anything optional for the rest of the game. Pro tip, if you sneak into a base, watch a captain, and then kill him. You get double progression toward your next sword stance. This seems to be the perfect time to discuss it, and well, Ghost of Tsushima's combat is just... so good. Like most games these days, Jin comes pre-built with light attacks and heavy attacks. You're able to block attacks, and if you block or dodge at precisely the right moment after obtaining the skills to do so, time slows down, affording you the chance to strike at your opponent unguarded. The nuance and tactics come from the various aforementioned stances you utilize against specific foes, depending on what weapon they wield. Melee enemies come in a few different flavors. You've got your sword guys, your shield bros, your spear jerks, and your big boys, and or brutes, if you will. They will group around you and typically attack 2 at a time. Switching to the stance that best counters each of these reckless gentlemen will allow you to use your heavy attacks mapped to triangle to break their block and stagger them briefly. Lots of games are running stagger meters these days, and I think Ghost of Tsushima might be my favorite. While you can block normal attacks, parry attacks marked with a blue icon, and have to dodge out of the way with ones accented with a red icon, being aggressive with your heavy attack can nullify an enemy's most powerful onslaught, if timed correctly. My personal favorite is a combo of heavy attacks you can acquire later on to make a shield-bearing enemy wish he'd never left his Mongolian homeland. A string of 5 attacks will quickly break through their iron defense and allow you to finish them off with style. Switching forms on the fly makes every dance engaging. However, if you do take a certain number of hits from particular enemy types when you have access to a stance that will counter it, the game will pause, tell you that, and only allow you to resume once you do in fact switch stances. Not a big deal, but it can be a minor annoyance when you are purposely staying in one stance to dispatch a low health enemy of a different variety. But we are in the shortcomings section, so back to the good stuff. I'd be remiss not to mention the Ghost Stance, an ability granted to Jin when he kills enough enemies without taking a hit. Activating it immediately terrifies all enemies around you, turns the world black and white, and affords you 1-hit kills on 3 Mongols of your choosing. When you slash, the whole screen goes red, and it is just a visual treat. It really makes you feel like the true Ghost of Tsushima, where legend and reality collide. Added on top of all this are a plethora of quick-fire weapons and long-range armaments that you can use at any time. I'll be honest, I found the base fighting so delightful that I rarely used my kunai, smoke bombs, sticky bombs, or anything else once I was staring down a crew of Mongols. Even on the light attacks mapped to the square button, each swing felt meaty and satisfying. The feedback from the rumble on the controller made me somewhat of a bloodthirsty addict. Well, I mean, more than usual, which is honestly surprising. I appreciate so much how Jin moves through his enemies like a breeze through the trees. There is a visceral beauty in how he will slice into a foe only to follow through with a stylish flourish. Once you learn how the ebb and flow of how encounters operate, you start to see how such a person who can constantly, dare I say it, adapt and overcome, could oppose a handful of villains simultaneously. I also enjoy sprinting to the backline to deal with pesky archers and bomb slingers in a slice or two, and acquiring the skill to block arrows allows you to obtain maxed out points in my book. The strikes from your katana feel like and act as a real katana would. It does real damage, and most unarmored enemies are felled quickly. Archery feels excellent as well, with the added bonus of eventually being able to briefly slow down time to land that perfect shot. Special mention given to the noise it makes when you land a headshot and the cool draw animation for the bows, which, in the case of the longbow, is something the game doesn't just give you. Throughout Jin's journey, he does acquire the half-bow, which is great for medium range and setting enemies ablaze, but lacks the punch and distance you gain from its big brother. One of my favorite things found in Ghost of Tsushima are these completely optional tales told by a musician named Yamato. To acquire the longbow, along with other specialty moves that use up your resolve, aka the little yellow circles above your health bar that you can use to typically heal yourself, remember the mana stuff we were talking about, you have to seek out these various myths that prevail on the island. typically ending in a duel. You then gain that ability at the cost of up to 1 to 3 of your resolve slots. This introduces an interesting wrinkle to the already excellent sword fighting system, where you can burn resolve and use flashy moves, or hold onto it to heal yourself when you're on your back foot. Side note, when Jin uses his resolve to heal himself, he sort of psychs himself up, which is what I do in real life right before I attempt to move a heavy object. Fun fact, right? These missions are presented to you in this beautiful art style that makes the folklore seem larger than life. Although the longbow I mentioned before doesn't use resolve to fire, it is the focus of one such tale, along with various special armor sets you cannot acquire any other way. Jin also has access to poison and berserk darts that are pretty identical to what we've seen in Assassin's Creed Black Flag and Rogue. They're great along with your bow and distracting wind chimes when you're planning on going for a more subtle route. You can even utilize assassinations and chain assassinations later on to quickly thin out a herd of camping Mongols if you approach from tall grass or from a rooftop. I personally didn't indulge in this style of fighting much in the early game because, without realizing it, I was fully embracing my role of a samurai. Oftentimes, I would pull out my flute, play a little song, and walk slowly toward a group before facing them. There's a turning point, however, and that is when I felt more comfortable implementing these less honorable tactics. Use them enough, and the game will show you flashbacks of Jin's principled samurai upbringing, which panged me with guilt every time. On the flip side, I preferred the more direct approach of the standoff. Basically, as was more common in that time period, a noble samurai would announce his presence and face off against his enemy. You approach one bad boy and hold triangle or the heavy attack, and are supposed to release it when they charge at you. Go too early and you lose all but a sliver of your health. Act too late and you still lose a chunk. However, and this is where it gets really fun, if you time it perfectly, you will slay that enemy with one strike. We talked about style points before with arrow deflection, but standoffs take it to a whole new echelon. Leveling up your ability to assault even more Mongols after your initial attack can allow you, with the right armor equipped as well, to take out a handful of them in an instant. At the start of your journey, these tete-a-tetes are pretty simple. Later on though, these enemies wise up and try to draw you into attacking by psyching you out. This again puts an emphasis back on patience and rewards the more reserved warriors, rather than the reckless ones. Also, it just feels and looks incredible. You will find denizens of Tsushima held captive on a road, and if you pull off a successful standoff, Jin looks like a flash of death before their eyes. Maximum style points achieved. You will also have chances to engage in one-on-one duels like I mentioned previously. Limiting you to only your katana and accompanying skills makes these battles tense spectacles that I always enjoyed partaking in. Even after losing to some of the more difficult optional ones later on, I found that persevering, watching, and learning my opponent's movements allowed me to prevail after just a few tries. Also, the way these duels start with Jin cracking his katana from its sheath with only his thumb is just... Did they make this game knowing I'd play and fawn over it? To make you a more potent warrior, there is a minor upgrade system in place for your gear. Improving all the tools in your arsenal is incredibly straightforward. Picking up supplies, iron, bamboo, etc. are used to increase your sword's damage, the protection your armor provides, and carrying capacity for projectiles, among other things. 1,000,001 pieces of loot aren't hurled at you every second, and I found myself gravitating toward the sets that not only looked enticing, but complemented my personal playstyle. Oftentimes in papows like these, I feel set upon by the sheer volume of things to do and areas to explore that I rarely feel connected to any of the supporting cast of characters. Ghost of Tsushima is not like this. If anything, other game devs should look at how they handled these lesser protagonists. I know all of their names, motivations, and fighting styles. Each of them has a questline that runs throughout your grand journey across the island. Once again, these seem to be optional missions that afford experience points that lead to skill points that allow you to bolster your lethality or exploration. I say seem to because they feel like main missions you'd find in most other games. The reason I adore them so much is that in your main story missions, these fighters will sometimes accompany you. Jin is allowed to speak to them before these impending battles, and it just makes them feel so much more real. These warriors aren't just here to serve Jin and his cause. They fight to protect this island and support Jin because he has supported them. Lady Masako's family was slaughtered by a rival clan, and she fears that someone from Tsushima still seeks her death. Yuna's biggest goal in life is to save her brother Taka and head for the mainland. Norio is a monk whose brother was captured and tortured by the Mongols. Kenji is a seedy sake salesman with a heart of gold who wants to help reclaim the island after supplying the foreign occupiers with drink. Ryozo is a ronin who has a past with Jin and dreamed of becoming a samurai himself. And finally, the best of them all, Sensei Ishikawa, is hesitant to train you in the ways of the bow after his prize pupil defected to train the Mongolians in archery. Each has a past, a desire, and an arc throughout the game. Themes of family, honor, revenge, servitude, and respecting tradition are presented through the lens of these troubled friends of Jin. It also forces our leading man to face what he's done and try to pass along that wisdom to his allies. The connection I felt to each of them made charging alongside them into battle all the more exhilarating. Lord Shimura, Jin's uncle, and Koten Khan act as the spectrum of honor and savagery, with all of our players falling somewhere between them. Each relationship Jin has is compelling in its own way, with the one with his uncle being, for me, the most difficult to watch. While I discuss the excitement I've felt in combat and the peace I've experienced in the quieter moments, it is also in the sorrow that has remained with me in regards to Jin in Lord Shimura's tale that feels so piercing. I won't get any more specific than that, but it was just very well done. Ghost of Tsushima presents this larger-than-life story based in history, but does an excellent job of displaying how humanity acts in such crippling times. I honestly can't remember a game that I've played in recent memory that has made me experience such a vast array of emotions. Okay, I prattled on long enough about the things that make this title superb, but I want to quickly wrap up with rapid-fire details that I still swoon over. Here we go. I love the following. The little slide into crouch Jin does after going from sprinting to stealth, the little shake the icons make when they go from red to white on the map, how he puts his hand out gladiator style to run it through tall grass, the ability to pet foxes, how sweat and tears appear on faces, the sound Jin's katana makes when sheathed, the stabbing animation, the various ways Jin cleans his bloody katana after a fight that you can enact yourself, the sound of blood-gurgling Mongols occasionally make once defeated, the way you usually have to face a person directly and press R2 as opposed to just having some nebulous radius around them in which to start up a conversation, auto-descending from a shrine so you don't have to climb down it manually, the sound of slashing and crunching within battles, the grapple hook, because every amazing game has a grapple hook. And last but not least, the prompt to end suffering on a downed enemy that gives you a sphere of resolve. Besides being one of the edgiest phrases in gaming, it perfectly encapsulates the samurai code, along with feeling incredibly satisfying. For a little bit of added context, I played the whole game with English voice work, and it was very well done. You can play the game with Japanese VO and manipulate the subtitles too. Also, there is this black and white video mode with grainy effects and muted audio that pays homage to the Kurosawa films that helped influence the game. There are a lot of options when it comes to experiencing Ghost of Tsushima, and I really appreciate it. While the title is stellar, it isn't perfect. This is mostly nitpicks because I found it hard to find things that were hampering my own personal enjoyment of the game. While the visuals can be overwhelmingly stunning at times, occasional texture pop-in on things such as your horse can briefly pull you out of the experience. Facial animations aren't industry-leading, but were still serviceable. Jin does also appear to clip through things like bushes and whatnot. If you're wearing a hat, as you squeeze through a small opening, your headgear becomes the real ghost of the island. I love the implementation of the grapple hook, but sometimes using it as well as the climbing reminded me a bit of Horizon Zero Dawn, and not in a flattering way. It can be unruly and slightly irksome. Horse riding sees the camera bounce up and down a little and lacks a strong tangible feeling like it was present in Red Dead Redemption 2, but thankfully you don't have to tap X indefinitely to gallop, so I guess it's kind of a wash. Also, without a dedicated lock-on, Jin will sometimes completely whiff if you attempt to charge up an attack meant for someone striking you from behind. That only really came into play a few times, and I think having spatial awareness without getting tunnel vision is paramount to your success fighting multiple enemies. I also wish I didn't have to use the touchpad to engage the guiding winds in the game to my next checkpoint, to bow, use the Last of Us listening vision, and bring out my flute. I like using all of these elements in the game, but I found the touchpad to be a bit, touchy at times, for lack of a better phrase. From time to time, I found myself swiping up to help locate my next objective a handful of times, which grew a little tiresome. Lastly, and this is just a small gripe I have with lots of games, but I despise when a character in a third-person game takes steps as if they were walking up a slope. I understand that it might cause some fighting on said steps to lock you into an animation and is therefore glossed over, but it just bugs me. Like I said before, these are mostly minor dings against the game, but I wanted to mention them all the same. Some of these aspects might really bother some, but they never detracted enough from my general experience. Overall, Ghost of Tsushima is exceptional. It knows what it is and does everything it sets out to do phenomenally well. The characters are wonderfully memorable, the fighting mechanics are engaging, allowing you to choose how to fight, and the island of Tsushima is a pleasure to explore. Its extremely minor faults are eclipsed by the competency of all other aspects of the game. If you enjoy period piece open world, POW games, such as Red Dead Redemption 2 and any of the Assassin's Creed titles, you will find this tale superior in many ways. If you enjoy Japanese culture and want an interactive history lesson on the struggles and myths found on this particular island, there's much to dive into. If you like games that respect your time, then please go support this game. It is easily worth the full price of admission. Again, I am biased toward the style of game and the location it's set in. However, I think regardless if you share those feelings with me or not, you'll find heaps of enjoyment here. I honestly can't think of a more apt name for a studio than Sucker Punch when I reflect on this game. My hopes were high, and somehow they surpassed them, leaving me dumbstruck. Legionnaires, thank you so much for joining me here today. I hope you enjoyed this kind of new format to the review. I wanted to mention this as well, I forgot to in the actual review, but the music is so good, it's impeccable within this game. Shoutouts to the composers, which are Elon Eshkar and Shigeru Umbayashi. I probably butchered those names, but really fantastic job. Kind of this mixture of both Japanese, old school kind of, Kurosawa style music, but also this wonderful Mongolian throat singing. It's amazing. It's so good. It's really good. Check it out. Please go listen to it, and you probably heard it throughout the review as well. I also want to thank everybody who's supporting us via Patreon. You guys mean the world to me. $5 up patrons, you get your name in the end here, along with some other benefits, so please check that out if you're curious. But honestly, the best way you can help us, besides checking out our Spreadshirt and Instagram and all those other links down below, is just sharing this around with a friend. That stuff helps so much, and I really appreciate it. I also want to just say one thing to the lovely developers over at Sucker Punch, and it's this. Arigatou gozaimasu. And until next time, Legionnaires, just remember to adapt and overcome. Bye.